Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second edition of the Decentralized Mic. Very nice to see a lot of people joining on our live stream here today. We are live on YouTube, Polkadot's Twitter account, or LinkedIn. And we will give everyone some time to join in, enjoy a little bit of background music. Feel free to use the live chat on all of the three different platforms to engage with our speakers today, or also with the community and other audience members that are joining today. Yeah, so while people are joining, I will do the introduction. Today, we have the second edition of the Decentralized Mic, a new online series from Polkadot. Today, we are going to talk about the topic of business development. And my name is Zoe. I'm a head ambassador for Polkadot and the host of this newly launched session where we discuss different topics on a monthly basis. We have started last month with the discussion of Web3 marketing, where we had a lot of great speakers going more into the definitions of Web3 marketing and also introducing the teams that got sponsored from a Decentralized Futures grant from Web3 Foundation to push Web3 marketing forward within Polkadot. Today, we are focusing on business development, and it's a similar setup where we have a little less amount of speakers joining than last time to keep the conversation much more engaged. But also all of the speakers that you see already here on screen that we are going to introduce shortly have received a grant from the Decentralized Futures grant from the Web3 Foundation. This means that these teams or the individuals that are representing specific teams here today are sponsored to kickstart new initiatives within the Polkadot ecosystem. And all of them are really working on growing Polkadot from a business development, sales, investor relations perspective. All of these themes we are going to discuss today. So to kickstart also, or before we introduce the speakers, just want to let you know you guys can ask questions. We really want to make this interactive. If there are conversations or questions about overall business development in Web3, also business development in Polkadot, specific questions to the speakers, please feel free to share them in the chat and we will make sure to guide them to the speakers. This is not a discussion here today to talk about specific token price or any other things. We really want to keep it on business development and, of course, on the discussion for the speakers. The goal is, of course, to present the speakers that have received these grants in the session today, but also to educate about business development. How is it different in Web3? Because we have a lot of technicalities that we need to discuss. So we want to keep it the aim to educate you guys, but also introduce the speakers and give them the spotlight here today. So let me introduce all of the great speakers here today. We have Max joining. He was the co-founder of PolkaPort East, also a fellow Polkadot head ambassador and joining from Korea today. Hey, Max.
Hello. I already left Korea last week and now back in Hong Kong, but Korea last week was fun.
Sorry, I mixed it up. Okay, Hong Kong and next week Singapore. So everywhere. Exactly. Amazing. From the Polka team, who is integrating Polkadot into major organizational infrastructures, we have the founder of Polka, Ingo, but he's also the founder of Kilt, a parachain on Polkadot, as well as Polkadot OG. You are in the ecosystem since over 5 years, 6 years almost, right? Or 6 years, maybe more, joining in from Berlin. Hello, Ingo, nice to have you.
Hi, nice to see you again.
Then we have the CEO of Transistor, Peter. They are driving the Polkadot growth and adoption in the US market. So we're covering all the markets. But Peter, before he founded Transistor, is also a Polkadot OG, previously worked with Parity before it got decentralized since 2017. Very excited to get all of your experience into this discussion today, Peter. Welcome.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me.
And we also have the senior BD manager from Moondance or from the Tansi network. Nicolas is joining us, who is the founder also of Crypto Monday in the Madrid area. If you guys know this very cool event community, and you bring also in a lot of experience from the Web2 sales area, right? You've worked with BMW before, but also long-standing crypto expert. Welcome to the Polkadot ecosystem. Recently joined Tansi. Hey, Nicolas.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, happy to be here.
Amazing. So I gave a quick high-level overview what you guys are doing, but of course would like to hear it from all of you, and maybe we can get the other speakers big on screen as well. If you can summarize in 2 minutes what you're actually doing with your initiative for business development or IR within Polkadot, that would be great. And Max, we start with you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Zoe, for this lovely introduction here. Yeah, as Zoe was saying already at the beginning, I'm kind of wearing 3 different hats that are all kind of relevant in this context in the Polkadot ecosystem. So first of all, I am since recently a Polkadot head ambassador. I was elected as head ambassador. The head ambassador program is actually a really interesting one. Super cool to have this on-chain collective of people representing the community and getting democratically elected. So I'm actually particularly excited to be part of that. So that's kind of the first hat. Second hat is Harbor Industrial Capital, which is a VC fund that me and my co-founder Mario started about 3 years ago. And it's really what got me into the Polkadot ecosystem in the first place. We were first investing with our own money, but then set up this fund whereby we help others to get exposure to the Polkadot ecosystem, accepting capital commitments, investing in the different Parachains and in DOT itself. So yeah, we've been running that for about close to 3 years now. And it's really what got me into the Polkadot ecosystem, and that's still how most people know me. Supported like 23 different projects so far, and we're obviously in constant contact with all of them. Perfect. And the third hat that is kind of the most relevant for this call here today is PolkaPort East. So he explained already, this is a growth and IR initiative funded by the Decentralized Futures program of the Web3 Foundation. So yeah, absolutely thrilled to be part of that as well. PolkaPort East is really focused or centered in Hong Kong. I can tell maybe a little bit later in this call why we decided to focus on Hong Kong and why we think it's such an incredibly important market. It's really all about growth, investor relations, and growing the presence of Polkadot in Hong Kong and APAC. So that's also why, as we heard in the intro before, last week I was in South Korea for Korea Blockchain Week, next week Singapore, so quite a busy schedule around the APAC region. But yeah, before going into further details, let me wrap up here and back to you.
Thank you so much. Ingo, let's continue with you. What kind of problem are you solving with poker in the Polkadot ecosystem? 2 minutes.
Yes, so we're trying to solve a very old problem, actually. The old problem is that probably a blockchain system which is, or blockchain ecosystem which is going to be successful needs some kind of adoption. And adoption is not only made by developers, it's not only made by small companies and so on, but it would be really nice if we also get big companies like enterprise, and it would be nice if we also get governments actually using the stuff that we make. That is not necessarily meant Polkadot, but anything in the Polkadot ecosystem. So that could be Substrate, that could be one of the Parachains, that could be one of the wallets that we produce, or an infrastructure component, and so on. But what we need is to be seen in the government space and in the enterprise space, because if we log in there and get successes there, then it will be so much easier for us to spread this adoption to others, because everyone's following the big ones. So business development normally does not trickle up, it trickles down. And this is why it's important to actually go to the big ones. This is, of course, very time consuming, cumbersome in many cases and so on, but someone has to take this up, and Polkadot wasn't very good positioned in that space for the last couple of years, and it was in the beginning actually, but now it was not for a couple of years, and we tried to pick this up again and make Polkadot successful in these areas. 2 minutes.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. That's a great introduction. So we had investor relations, now more the governmental side. Peter, what are you guys trying to solve in the US market with Transistor?
Yeah, thanks again for having me. So again, Peter Morick, CEO of Transistor, spent a lot of time in politics before joining Parity and the Web3 Foundation in 2017. Happy or sad 9/11, everyone out there, talking about crypto adoption in North America, and that's the primary focus for Transistor for various reasons. Parity and the Web3 Foundation really hasn't had a physical presence in the United States at all. There were some efforts in 2018, I believe, to potentially open up an office in San Francisco, but there was a push instead to invest a lot in China and Asia, which left the US Polkadot ecosystem in a rather tough spot, which has led to a lot of the upstart L1s and L2s gaining a lot of the mind share and market share in the United States. So we're focused on trying to get some of that mind share and market share back, focused on two main things, right? One, going after larger scale businesses with significant user bases to onboard to Polkadot. We have a proposal live in OpenGov right now to bring on a company called Billfold that does point of sale systems for large music events, that has several million users, I think 3.3 million users. And we're in negotiations basically to integrate the Polkadot crypto for crypto payments, stablecoin payments on Asset Hub into that point of sale system. So please check out that referenda in OpenGov as our first sort of big client to bring a lot more attention and usage to Polkadot from the United States.
And thank you, Peter. We already see a bit of the difference, what you are working on with the growth activities. And now we also have Nicolas from Moondance, who is really focusing on the technical adoption, right? If you want to summarize in 2 minutes what you guys are solving for the Polkadot ecosystem.
Yeah, of course. So our mandate is to accelerate the adoption of Polkadot in general. So it's a really wide mandate, right? But just to give some context on Moondance Labs, Moondance is a core contributor to Polka, but also to Tansy Network, which is an app chain protocol where anybody can launch their own app chain in just a few minutes. So based on the success that the Tansy Network has had in the last several months of operation, I think in the LFD campaign, season 1 that we had, which was Let's Fork and Dance, we had roughly 2,500 app chains deployed with 150,000 people interacting with the protocol and more than roughly like 3 million transactions. So based on that, we applied for the grant. And I'm not new to crypto, but I'm new to Polkadot. So this is a massive learning curve that I need to go through. But I'm just really happy to be here.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And maybe to stay with you, Nicolas, for the overall question when we go into definitions, right? Because you have like also new to Polkadot, but with your experience from Web 2 and Web 3, how would you define business development in crypto? I think, and Ingo would love to hear your input to this later as well, because for people that might join here from LinkedIn, maybe from the Web 2 space, crypto, the blockchain industry might be a bit confusing to understand. How would you define business development? But we are discussing here today.
Well, I've always said that business development is an elegant word for sales, right? But it's actually more than that. So I think it's a process of planning for future growth, and it goes by identifying new opportunities, forming partnerships, and in the sense of crypto, is adding value by accelerating the adoption of the utilization of blockchain technologies in general, right? In other areas and markets. But this involves understanding target audiences, market opportunities, and specifically the effective outreach channels for Web3 to drive success. So I would put it like that.
Yeah, this definitely makes sense. Ingo, you mentioned already the funnel, right? How would you comment on Nicolas? And are you bringing in with Polka like the traditional sales funnel in Web3 BD?
Yeah, so maybe first to comment, so when we are talking about decentralized futures, and we see many different business development companies here, and that has a reason. It is not that easy to define business development for Web3 because there's many different target groups and many types of business development that you have to make and that you should make. So for Web3 natives, it is really important to onboard a lot of developers, for example. So we need the developers who actually make projects on the infrastructure at Polkadot that we're trying to bring out into the market. So those people are crucial. But of course, also entrepreneurs are absolutely necessary. So we need the people who then make the business on top of these things. So it's important to also talk to them. It is also really important to funnel money into such a system. This is why it's so important that we talk to investors, like what Max does. So that is a totally different target group, right? So you cannot just have one salesperson selling the whole thing. Then we need the stuff that we do, like enterprise and government adoption. Somebody needs to take care of that as well. So and that is also a totally different approach. And this is, and the idea of decentralized futures is, of course, to be decentralized and not to have one department in Polkadot like many other ecosystems have that inside the foundation or wherever you place that, which is the business development department. And then you have one guy taking care of or two guys taking care of the developers, and two guys taking care of the entrepreneurs, and two guys of the investors, and so on. And that is what Polkadot in form of parity had before, and that didn't work out very well. So it must be for different reasons. So one of the reasons is probably that if you see that one of those directions needs more people or more funding, then it must be possible to actually put in more funding there. If you see that one section of that is really successful, then you have to somehow support them that they can get even more successful and maybe have more eyes on that. And then you have, apart from that you have all those different target groups, you also have different regions. So for example, Poker is working exclusively for Europe and Middle East. So we're not going to get in the way of Peter, who probably has some overlap with us in North America. So if a big company, if a big company from North America approaches us and says, hey, we actually want to jump on Polkadot, we don't say, haha, this is yours and this is ours now. We would forward that to Transistor because they can do it on the ground much better, because business development is in the end always a business, people's business, right? So I cannot be all over the place. I cannot be in Asia and Europe and the US and South America and Africa and Australia in the same place at the same time. So we have to have regional offices basically, and we have to have targeted offices which go to one specific use case, and they will use different marketing materials. They will use different approaches. They will have a totally different narrative and story and so on about Polkadot and the ecosystem. And this is why it's not such a good idea to centralize that and say, now we have this one product and this one product is going to be sold to everyone. This is not going to work, and this is why we have it so decentralized. So that is maybe my answer to or my addition to what Nicholas said.
Amazing. Yeah, no, you clarified or defined a lot, especially how it works in a decentralized way. We definitely need to talk about how do we structure this. But since you mentioned also the investor side, Max, maybe you want to add to this. What are you trying to achieve with investor relations? I mean, the word says it actually, but with PolkaPort East in the Asian region.
100%, yeah. I mean, I would say our mandate really is twofold in the sense of investor relations. One is investor retention, and the other is investor acquisition. Now, these things are, kind of two sides of the same coin, because if you think about it, an existing investor not selling $1 million is kind of the same thing as a new investor coming in and buying $1 million. So I think this is pretty important. Maybe before we had PolkaPort East and we were here in Hong Kong, and I've been in the crypto space since a long time. I go to all these events, all these crypto meetups, let's say, and then people are like, oh yeah, I invested in Polkadot like during the private sale, but nothing's happening really. so I'm thinking to sell, right? This is a very common narrative that we have heard, and it's very unfortunate. I'm not talking about retail investors, but I'm talking about like big whales, like big VCs, big VCs here in the APAC region have participated in the early sale of Polkadot back in the days. So one of the things that we're trying to do is with these guys, right, like do a series of events, for example, bringing in projects that are building on Polkadot, getting them the exposure to all the exciting things that are undoubtedly happening, right? But people don't necessarily see it otherwise, and that is unfortunate. Investor retention is also very much about engagement, right? So one thing that I also always like to share with them is like all the things that are happening in OpenGov, because yes, you can say OpenGov is messy and it's like confusing maybe for some people, but it's still exciting. And people who have skin in the game, and existing investors undoubtedly do have skin in the game by definition, they're usually quite interested about that. And so I encourage them to participate in OpenGov, speaking with me about it, tell them like the stories that are going on, the dramas that are going on. That actually gets people quite interested. You'd be surprised how they say, oh, wow, that's actually super interesting. I didn't know that all of this is happening, right? So this is one part about the whole investor retention aspect. Now, let's switch gears a little bit to investor acquisition, because obviously that's also very much what we're trying to do here. I think there's still a lot of potential in the APAC region for bringing new investors, new institutional money to Polkadot. The way I like to start my conversations these days is to think of Polkadot as a contrarian trade. And I genuinely think that is what Polkadot is at this stage. It's not a mainstream trade, right? It's not that everybody is in consensus saying, oh yeah, Polkadot is the next big thing. It's a contrarian trade, right? It's a bit like, I guess, shorting the housing market before 2008, right? It's something that very few people believed in, but the ones that did believe in it, well, it paid off very handsomely to that. So when I talk about Polkadot, then that's kind of the framing that I like to use. Everybody wants to be a contrarian investor, but very few have what it takes to actually pull it off and to make those contrarian bets. But you can kind of lead them a little bit into this direction. And that's also, in my experience, a really good way to get people's attention, right? Because if you say, oh yeah, Polkadot is a contrarian trade of this cycle, then usually people go like, interesting. Why do you think so, right? Why do you think it is gonna outperform compared to where it is at the moment? And once you've got that question, then you can tell all these exciting things that are undoubtedly happening. Everything about agile core time, about scaling, about jam. But these are, of course, very technical aspects. They're important, and I love to talk about them. But I think it's kind of good to get into the investor's mindset. Every investor wants to be a contrarian trader, a contrarian investor, but only very few have what it takes to actually do it. This is kind of the mindset in which I'm trying to guide them.
Wow. Okay. A lot of input. Thank you so much, Max. And it's very specific for the investor side. We of course want to keep it also more on BD, but maybe to add to this, Peter, from your side, do you have anything to add to what Max just said? Because you are working also, your activities is very broad in the US, and there's investor relations included, as I would assume. How would you comment on what Max said from a US perspective?
Yeah, for sure. And apologies if you hear a bark in the background. My dog is telling me it's time to go out in a half an hour here. Yeah, it's obviously as one of the small handful of teams operating in the United States, and also having been in the ecosystem for quite a while, I was actually brought into the Polkadot ecosystem by one of the original VC investors in Polkadot and Ethereum that I knew through the startup scene here in New York. So business development, IR, as Ingo said, and as Max said, it's a lot of people business and keeping up relationships and staying in people's inboxes, getting coffee, getting drinks, right? Like there's a couple memes out there about BD in Web3 or just in general, like BD is knowing a guy who knows a guy, or the BD is the ability to like get drinks 7 nights a week, which I try not to do, but sometimes has to happen. So yeah, I think certainly in North America, getting back into the minds and in the mind share of the investor class here will be crucially important. And the two ways that we're going to be able to do that is, one, just being a consistent personal presence with those key teams and individuals who are investing in Web3 protocols, and then also bringing in clients that will show those people, show the broader crypto community that we have on-chain activity, we have a lot of users, we have flagship clients. Most of the very large clients, users of Polkadot at this point are primarily US-based teams with Mythical and Unfinished. So leveraging those successes, those teams, those relationships to then sort of resell Polkadot to the investor class in the United States is certainly a big part of what we're going to try to do here.
Amazing. Okay, so if we talk more from high level investor than BD, where you mentioned these great memes, I came across them as well. Now, if we go a bit deeper, right, Nicolas, is where you guys come actually in. The builders are maybe not too interested about too much networking. They want a great tech. They want an SDK that works. They want maybe hackathons activities. How do you approach the builders from a outreach business development side?
Well, I've always taken the approach of working very closely with the technology teams, because you basically got to understand the technology to be able to communicate that accordingly, but also creating successful marketing strategies with the marketing team. So I would say those are the two most important things that I work on. Just being present in most of the technology meetings that I can, just to absorb as much as possible, and then trying to communicate those value propositions accordingly to everybody.
Amazing. And I mean, with Tansi, we also have a great technology, right, to deploy chains much faster, and which is like a great ecosystem to get a lot of resources from Polkadot directly for the builders.
Yes.
Amazing. I would like to add a question from the audience here directly. We have one audience from LinkedIn. And to jump into like more the strategy side, right? Someone is asking here, given all the experience on this, or everyone that's experienced on this panel within Polkadot ecosystem, what are some practical strategies that entrepreneurs and businesses can adopt to overcome the unique challenges of business development in decentralized networks? Very long question. I think if you want to share some specific strategies that you apply, that would hopefully answer the question. Ingo, would you like to comment on this?
I still try to understand the question. So because it says practical strategies that entrepreneurs and businesses, does that mean outside the Web3 world can adopt to overcome the unique challenges of business development in decentralized networks? So I must be honest, I don't understand the question. Zoe, do you understand it more like how entrepreneurs and businesses inside the Polkadot ecosystem can adopt to overcome, or what does the user mean?
I think that's what it means.
Yeah, I would also from outside of Web3, but this would not really make sense, because if you want to do business development within Web3, you need to do Web3 business development, right? Maybe you can share maybe the strategies that you apply with Polka.
Yeah. So when we talk to so what challenges do we have? So the first challenge that you normally meet when you talk to a big company is that they are not interested in blockchain. So nobody actually wants a blockchain. So everyone wanted a blockchain in 2017 because it was like a hype. So I want a blockchain to organize something in my company. And then it turned out that this is basically, that was mostly then what people implemented was something on Hyperledger, and that was always a real waste of money and time. So nobody wants that. So what you have to do when you talk with people from government and enterprises, that you actually have to find out what their issues are, what their problems are, and then try to sort them in a way which of them can actually be solved with distributed ledger technology and which can not. And if you find one where distributed ledger technology actually fits in, or one of the projects which we have in the Polkadot ecosystem fits nicely in, then what you would do is you would present a solution and somehow also mention that this is, by the way, really on the newest technology that we have, which is distributed ledger technology. And then we have a fantastic infrastructure behind that, which is called Polkadot. This is how we move forward. So we try always to actually first find out where it makes sense and where it doesn't make sense. So we have tons we've seen tons of projects over the last 7 years or 8 years where blockchain was not the right solution, and still people put in the blockchain for whatever reason, mostly to sell Hyperledger probably. So blockchain is useful when you have to collaborate between entities which not necessarily trust each other. This is the best use case where you can what you can do with the blockchain. So if you don't have these issues, then you probably don't want the blockchain, and you don't want to waste time trying to sell people a blockchain which they obviously don't need. That doesn't make sense because it's not going to work out in the end. So we try to really be very open and understand all the problems that a certain vertical would have, and then see if a company actually has these problems and if they are solvable with distributed ledger technology. And then what we try to put in is a solution. So we solution providers, and that makes definitely a big contrast probably to things that Nicholas does, right? So because we are really like in this direction, and then it becomes obvious that in these cases a decentralized network is exactly what they want and what they need, and then they're very happy that somebody brought the solutions, because SAP is going to bring them a totally different solution, which is probably not the right solution for them, because then they have to trust again their competitor or something like that. So what we can build with blockchain is trustless systems, and that is what sets us apart. And we can build great solutions on top of that, and not everybody knows about it. But for us, the wrong approach is actually to go and try to sell blockchain. What we're selling is solutions.
Amazing. And there are also a lot of solutions on top of Polkadot, right? Not to forget some of the parachains, like for example, specialized on identity and so on. So I think when you sell Polkadot, you also sell indirectly also maybe specific use case for parachains.
Especially that's most important for us. If we if you go to an enterprise and say, do you want a Polkadot? Then the answer is definitely no, they don't want a Polkadot, because they want a solution, and the solutions do not happen directly on Polkadot. Polkadot is an infrastructure where people have over the last 6 years built tons of solutions, and what we are going to sell is those solutions, and they happen to use Polkadot, right? So we're selling Polkadot always indirectly. The most direct case where we actually sell Polkadot is probably when we sell Substrate. And Substrate is something that we really take very, very seriously, because Substrate is, that's for those who are not so much in Polkadot listeners, Substrate is a framework on which you can build blockchains, and it's part of the Polkadot world. And Polkadot is also built on Substrate, and all the other parachains are also built on Substrate. So it's basically a toolbox with which you can build parachains. And this thing has the possibility to produce not only chains which are directly connected to Polkadot, but also to produce private chains. Why is that important? That is important because big companies and enterprises are really, really afraid of public permissionless networks very often. And what we don't want is to lose them just because we happen to have Polkadot, which is a public permissionless network. So, so how can we get them into our sales funnel? So the first thing that we can offer them is to we identify a problem that can be solved with blockchain, and then if they don't want to be on a public permissionless network, we can basically tell them, yeah, no problem, start with Substrate and a private network. The good thing is that if you do that instead of doing it on Hyperledger, is actually that you have later the option to go to connect yourself to the public permissionless network if you want to do that, which you don't have on Hyperledger because that's always going to be closed shop. And you have a technology which has been developed 6 years after Hyperledger has been developed, and it is not end of life. It is basically the future. So you are future-proof, and you have much more options than you had before. And this is how you get the people in, right? So we have to. So this is one of the products that we can really very good sell. But on top of that, of course, everything that the Parachains did, and as I said in the beginning, everything else like Nova Wallet and so on. These things are fantastic to have because it's not just Polkadot. It's always the ecosystem that we sell.
Amazing. Or also the app chain development, right, Nicolas, where you guys would come in. Tansi is to make app chain development or parachain deployment very easy. Ingo just said they're selling existing tech stack, which is already developed over the last years. You can also offer to build something new on Polkadot.
Exactly, and we've been really successful at it. I think Tansi is now expanding to other ecosystems as well. But we're certainly going to continue building on Polkadot as our main goal.
Amazing. And maybe to conclude this discussion, Max, I wanted to get back to you because you are actually selling a bit different things than Ingo just described, but you actually sell Polkadot directly because, as you described in the beginning, you want that investors invest and then engage also in OpenGov, which is kind of a product of Polkadot, right? The OpenGov interaction. If you want to comment a bit on what Ingo just said from your IR perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, who are we selling to, right? In principle, it's like any investor. Anyone who wants to make money is welcome. The reality is there are different groups of investors that we're speaking to. So there are, for example, the crypto natives, and then there are ones who are not, right? I actually quite like to focus on the people who are not in crypto yet. I mean, if you look at this Venn diagram, right, like it's these tiny dots that is already in crypto and maybe has some exposure to Ethereum, Bitcoin. And then there's the much bigger rest of the world of the other investors who are interested in, I don't know, real estate, energy, you name it, other tech startups, but don't have any connection to the crypto space yet, to the blockchain space yet. Maybe the first time they hear about it is actually through us. And then we can position Polkadot very nicely as the entrance into Web3. I think Polkadot has actually a very legitimate claim to exactly that, right? I mean, after all, Gavin coined the term Web3, right? So if for the first time you talk to somebody about this and then they associate it with Polkadot and then they start putting money there, that's actually pretty good. Oftentimes it's easier to talk to somebody with a background in, I don't know, let's say real estate about Polkadot than to talk about Polkadot with somebody who's really big on Solana, right? Because they already made their bets, right? If Sol doesn't pump, they're screwed, right? So then at that point, convert over to Polkadot is very difficult, right? It's all very tribal, as you all know. I mean, we're still doing it, but it's often difficult. I like to go after the much bigger market of, let's say, family offices, right? These are professionally managed investment corporations by one or sometimes two wealthy families. It's actually something that is very prevalent in Asia. I mean, let me tell you one story, right? So there are, let's say, okay, there's a grandfather here in Hong Kong, for example, who started with shipping, right, between, I don't know, mainland China and Europe. And then the father took the money from the grandfather and invested in real estate, right, grew the family fortune. And now it's kind of this time where the third generation is taking over the financial fortunes of the family. And then these guys usually go like, okay, we did shipping, we did real estate. What are the big opportunities of the future, right? And they often go very strategically about it, and they like that. And then they go like, okay, so we like things like, let's say, biotech, AI, and blockchain, right? We admit that we're not experts in any of these, right? Because let's say we come from a real estate or shipping background, but we want to work with like the best managers out there for all these individual verticals. And these are like amazing targets, in my opinion. And we had some great successes here. We have some of the largest real estate developer in Hong Kong who joined our fund, for example, recently. And so we need much more of that, right? Because these are people that have, millions, oftentimes billions of investable assets. We want to get them into Polkadot, because obviously the more money we raise, the more money is available for the entire Polkadot ecosystem, because we can then reinvest it back into the various startups that build on Polkadot. And let me allow to say one last step, so then I'm going to wrap this. There's also a really interesting overlap between IR and BD. Okay, we are more focused on IR, I would argue, between these two things here, maybe differently to some of the other teams here on this call. But one thing that is really interesting is because all these new investors who we bring in, they come from the real world in inverted commas, right? They come, as like in the example I just made, they come from a real estate background, okay, or a shipping background, or some other tech company background. Now, they first invest in Polkadot because the financial returns, right? You have to give it to them. I mean, that's why they are invested. They want to make money. But if they make money, if they're educated, and we're doing a lot about education here, like how can this be used? These guys also go like, oh, interesting. This technology, and Polkadot is a technology first and foremost, in which I just invested, I can actually also use that in my day-to-day business, right? For real estate purchases, right? For shipping, logistics, let's say, right? Yep. And then you go like, oh, okay. So I already have skin in the game. How can I build on that? Mm-hmm. So this is also a really interesting dynamic that we're seeing now emerge. I'm actually quite excited about it, and that's how we can bind these two things together. Cool. Thanks.
Amazing. Yeah, no, thank you for clarifying the intersection here, because it's super important. Ingo mentioned this in the beginning. All need to work together, right? It's the beauty of Decentralized Futures to fund a lot of smaller initiatives that have a specific focus. But then also the challenge is how to coordinate this with each other. And Ingo, would you like to comment on this? How this actually is currently happening?
Yeah, so I think it's happening naturally in a way. It's definitely not the first time that we meet in this round. So we try to coordinate as good as we can. We have one head ambassador. His name is William, who's setting up calls like on a weekly basis, where everyone who's somehow in BD, and that is much more than this round. So there's many people who actually are active in BD, be it as head ambassador or as BD person from a particular project, and so on. And there's a lot of initiatives which are going on, and we have huge calls with more than 30 people, I think, actually taking this business development efforts forward. And so the head ambassador William is basically trying to coordinate that, and I think there's an initiative also which goes with the governance proposal along to actually institutionalize these things so that we have better coordination. But I think we are grouping in a very, very natural and nice way. And what is important is that we all do a little bit different things. Either sometimes we do the same thing, but then we do it in different regions, or we do it in the same regions, but then we do different things. And that means that we don't have the feeling, at least I don't have the feeling, that I compete with anyone in this group. And that is really valuable for us, because we can openly share things. We can talk about deals that we could have, but maybe we cannot manage them correctly because we don't have the knowledge, or we are on the wrong place, or we can shift things around between us and be much more powerful than a group of people which would be competing against each other. So that is actually a very good feeling, and it's really it all emerged within the last half year. It's not like we're talking about something that is there for the last 3 years and now it starts working or something. So the Decentralized Future program were funded, Polka was funded 4 months ago. I think Transistor only 2 months ago. So we are not very far down the line, right? It's just happening right now, and it is happening in a much more coordinated and collaborative way than I would have imagined, which is actually a good sign for decentralized work. It seems to work, at least in BD.
Wow. Very good to hear. And I think we covered a lot now how that also the different teams focus on different target audience, right? Which is actually very good with their specific expertise and who these target audiences are. I would like to use the rest of the time also to engage more with the community. We already answered some questions, but I like this question here from Janae Evangelist about business models. Maybe Peter, you can take this on. He asked, like, what are some most used business models that we see gaining traction with Polkadot or blockchain overall?
Yeah, I'd highly recommend everyone take a look at Brian Armstrong's comments from, he's at some sort of a conference this week that he spoke at yesterday, talking about stablecoin payments. I think it is the use case, it's the product with true product market fit across crypto. He made comments about crypto payment rails being probably the best payment rails in the world right now. We're at a point now with transaction fees being lowered across the industry that you can really have cheap, fast, global stablecoin transactions to solve for payments in a whole lot of different verticals. So stablecoin, USDC primarily, payments, and the universe of infrastructure and applications around enabling a revolution in payments is, I think, really the sort of strongest direction for the crypto industry as a whole. And as you see with our first major client that we're onboarding to Polkadot, a big part of it is for USDC payment rails on Polkadot, on Asset Hub or Plaza. So I would recommend that everyone who's trying to drum up business in Web3 not get away from that conversation. I know there's a lot of exciting sort of edge case technologies and applications that we all get excited about, but for most people, explaining and selling a payments a solution is something that they are much more used to hearing about and also have a direct need for. If you can cut down on someone's Visa or MasterCard transaction fees and save them 2.5% by replacing that with USDC stablecoin payments, they will be very happy. It directly impacts the bottom line, and it's something that open permissionless blockchains have in fact solved for. And we can show a lot of on-chain activity by pursuing those sorts of clients as well. So I think that's obviously like the big one that everyone should be sort of building around, and that comes with all the necessary infrastructure around it. Like you need identity around payments, you need the ability to trade assets in exchanges. So all of that infrastructure is still important, but anchoring around this cheap, global, and fast payments infrastructure, I think, is crucial for the entire industry and Polkadot specifically. I will share the link for that talk from Brian Armstrong. Very prescient comments yesterday.
I actually agree, Peter. And just to add more to this point, I've been in touch with a bunch of payments companies and platforms that do global payments, remittances, B2B payments. It's a big sector right now, and they're quite interested in learning more about what Polkadot can bring to their solutions. So it's a big sector, especially in Latin American countries and African countries. So I've been engaging quite actively with that sector.
Ingo, you were agreeing too, I saw on the screen. Would you like to add to this?
No, I wouldn't like to add to this. So it's actually it's a good point what Peter just made, because this is I can totally understand that, and we have been approached by banks already who are interested in actually making cross-border payments faster and cheaper and so on. So there's definitely a market for that, and Polkadot is quite good here because we do have very, very low transaction fees. We do have the necessary stablecoins like USDC and USDT on Asset Hub, so we can jump in those things really, really easily without a lot of project works, which we can supply that, and that's a good point. So, totally agree.
Yeah, I shared the link. Obviously, Brian was pitching base, but it's relevant for all the blockchain industry. He was at Goldman Sachs Tech and Comms conference yesterday. Someone can share that link.
Yeah, we will do so here in the comments shortly. Okay, and so something that the speakers agree on, maybe to go more into also the challenges that we are currently facing. And Nicholas would like to bring this back to you to talk more from the builder's perspective, right? Since Tansi is pretty new in comparison to Polkadot overall, Moondance Labs also just recently funded. What are some challenges that you face at the current stage of your company?
I mean, when we talk to teams, explaining Tansi is actually quite easy because it's built that way. But when we talk to people from outside of Polkadot, it's the main challenge is for them to understand the technical complexity of the whole Polkadot ecosystem. So I think we need to make a better job on explaining, what the main features of Polkadot are, and just trying to communicate those value propositions effectively. And then there's also agreeing with what Max said, there's a market perception issue about the asset itself. So I think those are the two main challenges that I'm encountering when talking to leads. Those two.
All right, and maybe also coming back to the topic of, or anyone else wants to share challenges, what the negative part of the work at the moment?
I can say that the only challenge that we have, we knew it before that we're going to have it, is time. Because when you talk with big players, it's not going to happen next week. And so we know that from Kilt. So I've been, as you mentioned, with Kilt for 6.5 years now. So the biggest deal that we have ever made was Deloitte, which is a big consulting firm. We worked like 2 years on that. So that is the normal time frame we're talking about. So and that needs a lot of breath, right? So you cannot just give up because things are going slow. You cannot give up because things are not moving. You cannot give up because people don't call back. You just have to be very steadily working on a couple of deals and always be there and always be friendly and understand the others, that they cannot move in the way that we would love to move in Web3, right? So this is the only challenge that we have. It's just about timing. I don't think that we have an issue with the market perception or anything like that, because we are actually selling solutions, and people love solutions, and most people actually don't care about the underlying infrastructure. We know that we have a very good infrastructure, maybe the best, or technology-wise the best infrastructure that people can have, and we can also argue for that. But people are first looking at the solution and then later at the technology. And if they got a fantastic technology through us, they are thankful for that. But it takes time until they actually implement something. So that is our only challenge, I would say.
Thank you. Yeah, I like that you said it's not like the tech itself, right? Thank you for mentioning this. But maybe regulatory or regulations could be also a challenge. Maybe Max, you're agreeing. Maybe you want to add to this, and I would like to hear from Peter as well, how you guys overcome these, or if you see it as a challenge in your respective markets, North America and Asia.
Sure. Yeah, I can take a crack at this. Look, Hong Kong is a very interesting place. I mean, I've been living here for 10 years. I've been calling it my home. Really love the city. Hong Kong has traditionally always been a bit a crossroad between the East and the West, where foreign ships would arrive, load up on goods from China, and then sail back. So it's always had this kind of meeting point kind of aspect to its history. When you look at the history of crypto in Hong Kong, there are also quite a lot of interesting companies that were formed here. So it's really interwoven, the history with crypto and the history of Hong Kong. I mean, Binance was here for quite a while. Crypto.com is here. BitMax was totally founded here. Well, then obviously the more notorious one, FTX, is also very much a Hong Kong story. And I guess it was around that time, right, around the FTX collapse, when the Hong Kong government, that in the past was quite embracive of the industry, or just at least like, let it run, were saying, no, we don't actually want that. It's too risky, it's too dangerous. And then they started to pass a bunch of regulations that made it very difficult to operate a crypto company in the city. So they all kind of moved overseas. Some moved to Singapore, some to the United States. So it wasn't really, as great from a crypto ecosystem participant in Hong Kong as it used to be. But then I would say about 1 year later, things, or the wind, started to change again. It's not really like an official line, I guess, but this is sort of my personal interpretation of what happened, which is that the Chinese government in Beijing started to realize that this whole crypto thing is not going to go away, right? Beijing never really liked it, right? They were never big fans of decentralization, as any student of history would know. They saw it as a threat. They also saw it as a threat to capital controls, which still are in place on the mainland. However, they kind of started to realize that, yeah, this thing is not going to go away. So what are we going to do about it? If we just keep shutting it out, all the innovation is going to move to the United States or wherever. And from a geopolitical perspective, that's, of course, not particularly great. And then, that's my interpretation, I have to say here, the leadership in Beijing was like, okay, but we have Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a special administrative region of China. And so it can act as some sort of a regulatory sandbox. And so what Beijing essentially did is they gave the green light to Hong Kong to be more embracive of the crypto industry in Hong Kong, start experimenting around with it and welcoming crypto companies back into the city. And that's what happened, right? That's about a year ago now. And then the SFC, which is the financial regulator in Hong Kong, passed this new set of laws that suddenly made it possible for crypto exchanges and other trading outfits to set up shop, to become licensed in Hong Kong, and to act kind of as this sandbox. I mean, if it's successful, this will be, in the eyes of Beijing, this will be expanded to the rest of China. If not, they'll figure out something else. But currently, it's actually a very vibrant ecosystem. And that's a really good thing, right? Because you have all the builders coming to Hong Kong because they know they are safe here. They can do what they like. They have regulatory certainty. And very importantly also, that's why I was saying at the beginning of this talk here, this crossroads between the East and West. You have all the mainland Chinese developers and investors coming to Hong Kong, right? Because if they're in Shanghai, in Guangzhou, it's, they still have like a lot of like regulatory hurdles that they have to face. They come to Hong Kong, set up a company there. They can do what they want. They can start building in the Web3 space here in Hong Kong. And this is very important, they can invest here, right? So wealthy investors come to Hong Kong, invest into, other crypto companies around the world. So Hong Kong kind of becomes true to this kind of crossroads between the East and West and regulatory sandbox kind of thing that it was. And one last sentence I want to say about this, which is Hong Kong is a tiny country, or a tiny city, I should say, but it really boxes above its weight in that sense. And that's exactly because of that.
All right, we learned a lot from the Asian perspective. Thank you, Max. But maybe Peter, if you want to keep it shorter, but also impactful, how do you approach these regulatory challenges in North America in comparison?
Yeah, so I was a core part of the team working with the SEC at Parity and Web3 Foundation from, say, 2018-19 until 2021 or so. The primary sort of chunk of that engagement. So within the United States, I still think like teams can rely in some respect on knowing that Polkadot as a protocol did the work to engage effectively with regulators in the United States, the SEC being the sort of pace-setting regulator for financial and securities regulators globally as well. However, I think going forward, regulations in the United States and potentially globally for crypto is going to be a lot more. It's going to be a lot more navigatable, more easy to navigate. In the United States, there was something called the Chevron decision from the Supreme Court, which sort of took some of the assumed powers out of the administrative state, out of the regulatory agencies like the SEC and the CFTC, saying that the courts will be the ultimate sort of deciders on many of these otherwise regulatory issues, unless the legislature here in the United States specifically passes laws that give regulators very specific authorities over financial markets or energy markets. So while the sort of existing regulatory climate will continue in the near term, in the longer term, it's going to take companies like Coinbase, who is already in multiple lawsuits with the SEC, a few years and probably a few tens of millions of dollars in legal fees to push those cases through to the Supreme Court, at which point we'll have, I think, a lot more clarity on the regulator's role in crypto and blockchain and Web3. And I think it's going to be a lot better for projects. I don't think that regulators globally are going to run around shutting down blockchains. None of the major US L1s and L2s have serious problems with regulators in the United States. So there is not going to be a major global regulatory clampdown that like eliminates some of the competition from the field. I think actually things are going to loosen up in the next 5 years, or at the very least be better understood, and regulation in and of itself will be less of a topic in crypto than it is today.
Amazing. This is a great summary and more like optimistic outlook for this always critical and a very criticized topic, regulations, but they do impact business development, investor relations, right? So it's good that we touched on it. Thank you for your expertise on it from the different markets in Asia and America. If there are any follow-up questions, I think Ingo and Nicolas can also follow up online how this is all managed in the European area. I would like to close our conversation for today. We covered a lot of topics. We overall learned about different teams that got grants and funded by Decentralized Futures to move business development, investor relations, and also builder relations forward in Polkadot. We also learned about the target audience, how is it different, right? And what is your customer segment actually? And that it is a bit different to do business development or sell a product in Web3 than in Web2. Of course, the technology is something super new, but we have experts in the ecosystem that can really place and convince people to integrate within Polkadot. And if there are more questions, I hope you answered a lot of questions from the audience today. Please connect with all of the speakers on LinkedIn or Twitter and reach out. If you have a cool idea or would like to build on Polkadot, these are your go-to contacts. And I assume that we see a lot of you guys also in Singapore. We have a big Polkadot booth at Token 2049, so please come by. A lot of people will be there if you want to talk about Polkadot. And I look forward to see a lot of you guys in our next Decentralized Mic session in a month. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Everybody.
Thanks.